Hello, everybody, and welcome into this OKPreps special here on OKPreps.com. I'm Michael Knight, your host for the evening and the director of OKPreps.com. It's a special night as the 2019 football season has come to a close, and it's time to announce the 10 finalists for the 2019 OKPreps Player of the Year Award. You see a lot of the helmets here tonight, and all of these helmets signify a player or players, in the case of one school, that are finalists for this year's 2019 OKPreps Player of the Year Award. It's been a great football season throughout the year, and I can't believe that it's over, but with the postseason comes postseason awards. So we're about to take a look at 10 of the absolute best players in the state of Oklahoma this year. But before we do that, we want to remind you to subscribe if you haven't done so already to our YouTube channel. We thank all of you tuning in there. Just go to youtube.com/OKPreps, hit subscribe, and you'll get all of our highlight features. Go back and watch some of our championship highlights, some of the championship previews as well, or any of the highlights that we had throughout the 2019 football season if you're missing some football right around now. And then as well, be sure to check back throughout the next couple of months as we are about to dive headfirst into basketball season. So you'll want to check out all of our basketball highlights right there. Just go to youtube.com/OKPreps, hit subscribe, and you'll get all of our video content before we even publish it to OKPreps.com. For those listening, we appreciate you tuning in. For the podcast fans out there, you can do so as well. Just go to iTunes or Apple Podcasts, search OKPreps, and hit subscribe. You'll get all of our great podcast content. We're going to have some season in review podcasts coming out over the next couple of days, so be sure to subscribe and tune in for those. And then finally, like and follow us on social media. Go to Facebook and like us on there, and then follow us on Twitter at OKPrepsTV. And as always, you can visit OKPreps.com for all the latest in high school sports all across the state of Oklahoma, including all of our postseason content, as we're going to have something new dropping every single day leading up to New Year's Eve, where we will announce the winner of the 2019 Player of the Year Award. But first, before we get to that, we have to announce the finalists. And with this announcement comes the announcement of our Player of the Year poll. We have a poll that goes along with this announcement, and so you can go to okpreps.com and vote for your pick for this year's 2019 Fans' Choice Player of the Year. The winner will be announced on December 30th. The poll opens as this is published, so be sure to vote daily, vote often. You can vote as many times as you want for your choice for this year's Fans' Choice Player of the Year. But just keep in mind, just because you're voting for your pick doesn't mean somebody else across the state of Oklahoma isn't voting for theirs, as we have plenty of situations where multiple people are voting for different players. And so if you're worried about the percentage points, it all works out in the end. So be sure to vote daily, vote often, and we will be announcing the winner in 2 weeks on December 30th. So the poll will be open for 2 weeks, and then it'll close at noon on December 30th, and we will announce the winner that afternoon and into the evening. And then, as I mentioned, on New Year's Eve, December 31st, we will announce the 2019 OKPreps Player of the Year with another special right back here in our OKPreps studio, where we'll be joined by this year's winner of the award. So be sure to stay tuned in to OKPreps for that. But for now, let's take a look at this year's 10 finalists for the OKPreps Player of the Year Award in 2019.
Asher Link, senior quarterback, Metro Christian.
Asher Link was a finalist for the award last year, and he took his game to a completely new level this year as a senior, helping lead Metro Christian to a perfect 15-0 season and a state championship victory over Vian this past Saturday. He saved his best performance for the last game of the year in their title victory over Vian, but more on that in a bit. Asher Link had a complete season for the Patriots as he was on his game passing and running the ball, and even played a little bit of defense as well. On offense, he threw 239 completions on 342 pass attempts. He completed 67% of his passes for just over 4,000 yards, 52 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. He was also Metro Christian's primary ball carrier as he had 142 carries for 1,350 yards and 21 touchdowns. I mentioned him playing defense sparingly. When he did, he came up with big play after big play. He finished with 3 interceptions on the defensive side of the ball. One of those was a game clincher in the championship game against Vian. I mentioned him saving his best performance for last, as Link would throw for 3 touchdowns, he would run for 3 touchdowns, and he would have that game-sealing interception that set up a 62-yard Asher Link touchdown run that put the game away for Metro Christian as they would beat Vian in an instant classic. Here's head coach Jared McCoy on why Asher Link should be this year's Player of the Year.
Oh, there's no question he's a winner. I mean, 2 years, 27 wins in 2 years. We got the opportunity to play a lot of football. His accuracy as a passer, the deep ball, the underneath stuff, his ability to run, everything runs through him in our offense, but he's our best player overall. He keeps the defense off the field, and then you're talking about a kid within 20 or 30 snaps on defense, has 3 interceptions, all in big games. He's definitely one of the best players I've ever coached.
As we mentioned earlier, Asher was a finalist for the Player of the Year award last year as a junior. He had a breakout season a year ago as a junior, but he took his game to a completely new level this season, accounting for 73 touchdowns, and a big reason why Metro Christian was this year's Class 2A state champion.
Blake Nowell, senior wide receiver, Plainview.
We go to Class 3A for our next Player of the Year finalist, as Plainview's Blake Nowell is a finalist for this year's award. The TCU commit has had an outstanding senior season, and what didn't he do for Plainview as he led them to a 12-2 record. They made it all the way to the state championship game in Class 3A before losing to eventual champion Lincoln Christian. Blake would finish the year with 63 catches for over 1,000 yards, 1,093 yards to be specific, 13 touchdown receptions. He also ran the ball for 5 touchdowns and also finished with 170 yards on the ground. He also had an impact on defense with 29 tackles and 1 interception from the safety spot. And then he was a threat in the kick return game as he took not 1 but 2 kickoffs back for touchdowns. Blake Nowell was a complete performer for Plainview. He came into this season as a player to watch in Class 3A, and he lived up to the hype as he's one of the top playmakers in the state of Oklahoma when it comes to the offensive side of the ball. He lived up to those expectations and then some. And what's interesting about Blake, we mentioned he's a TCU commit. He plans on graduating in December and going ahead and enrolling early at TCU. And from everything that we've heard, he's actually expected to get some significant playing time as a true freshman next year at TCU. And there's an easy reason to see why. Whether it's on the offensive side of the ball or in special teams, Blake is a very special talent. And here's Plainview head coach Joe Price on why Blake Nowell should be this year's Player of the Year.
You know, I think the thing about, Blake is that he's very dynamic in all the things that he can do. Kick returner, punt returner, punter, wide receiver, running back. I mean, we used him all over the field. And then all the playoffs games, he played safety for us all through the playoffs. So you factor in a lot of those things where he's such a dynamic guy that can play basically everything and really never came off the field for us. Did a great job at all of it. I think, offensively as a skill player, he can catch a bubble screen and go all the way. He can beat people deep and go all the way. There's just a lot of different things that he can do, especially with him being a 6'4" guy. When you see the athletic ability that he shows out there, I mean, it's pretty amazing. That a guy his height is so good at catching screens and doing those things and be able to outrun everybody all the way to the end zone. And then in the return game, he's pretty fearless. For a tall guy, you don't see guys that are Usually that's fearless as far as just taking the ball and just hitting it and going. But that's the way he operates, and that's the way he plays. And I think you throw all that stuff together, and you've got a really dynamic player right there.
He's one of the best athletes in the state, regardless of class, and it's been extremely fun to watch him progress over the last several years. I remember first seeing him with some early tape as a freshman, as a sophomore, and I just thought to myself, this kid athletically is so much better than just about everybody on the field. And now that stuck with him. He continued to grow. He continued to get bigger, stronger, faster, and he became one of the best players in the state of Oklahoma. And that's why he's one of this year's 2019 OKPreps Player of the Year finalists.
Brennan Presley, senior wide receiver and defensive back, Bixby.
Brennan Presley is an Oklahoma State commit. He committed to the Cowboys over the summer before his senior year, and he has had an outstanding senior campaign. One of the best seasons that we've seen from a Bixby Spartan, and Bixby definitely no stranger to the spotlight, winning 5 out of the last 6 state championships in 6A Division II. Presley was a big reason why the Spartans did something that they've never done before in 2019. They completed a perfect 13-0 season, the first time the Spartans had had a perfect record in school history. They beat Stillwater in a highly anticipated state championship game, and Presley didn't wait long to make an impact this year as a senior, as he had one of his best performances of the year in their season opener down in Texas against Mansfield-Timberview. He had 17 catches for 237 yards and 6 touchdowns. As Bixby would knock off Mansfield-Timberview, Presley would grab headlines early, and he would grab headlines often this season as a senior. Kind of similar to some of the other finalists on this list, there isn't a whole lot that Presley didn't do for the Spartans this year. When you take a look at the stats, he finished with 98 catches on the year for 1,515 yards and 24 touchdown receptions. He also carried the ball 18 times for 129 yards and a touchdown. On the defensive side of the ball, he finished with 26 tackles and 7 interceptions, 2 of which he took back for touchdowns. He also had a kick return touchdown, a punt return that he took back for a touchdown, and he had a blocked field goal again in that season opener against Mansfield-Timberview. So he had a touchdown receiving, rushing, defensively with a pick 6. He also had a kick return, a punt return. He scored 5 different ways. Outstanding season for Brennan Presley, one of the best players in the state of Oklahoma. Here's his head coach, Lauren Montgomery, on why Brennan Presley should be this year's Player of the Year.
Well, everybody knows that he's extremely talented and he makes plays on offense, on defense, on special teams. But I think the thing that probably goes unnoticed if you're just watching him play in a game is his leadership ability, his humbleness, and his just willingness to do whatever for his teammates. And I think that's one of the biggest things why we've had success at Bixby, and then why Brennan's had so much success as well.
We mentioned Presley being one of the top athletes in the state, and he comes from a significantly athletic family, as his older sister is a track star at Ole Miss. His younger brother, Braylon, scored the game-winning touchdown in that championship game, and he's already starting to get Division I offers, some Division I looks at the running back position. But Brennan Presley, there's no doubt that he is a special talent, a special athlete, and that's a big reason why he's one of the finalists for this year's OKPreps Player of the Year award.
Chase Ricke, senior quarterback, Lincoln Christian.
Chase Ricke came into this season coming into his 3rd year as the starting quarterback for Lincoln Christian with high expectations after the way last season ended in a heartbreaking semifinal loss to Heritage Hall. With the majority of their starters returning in 2019, Lincoln and Chase Ricke had high expectations, and honestly, he lived up to them. He finished the year throwing for 3,500 yards, completing 75% of his passes. He finished with 51 touchdowns and only 3 interceptions. He also carried the ball 69 times for 333 yards, and he also added 4 touchdowns on the ground. Combining throwing and running, he finished the season with 55 touchdowns total. He led Lincoln Christian to a 14-0 season and their second state championship in school history. And it should be noted also that Lincoln Christian is definitely no stranger to the OKPreps Player of the Year award, as this is the fourth time that Lincoln Christian has had a finalist for the Player of the Year award. The only time that they've had a winner was back in 2015, as Micah Wilson, the quarterback for the Bulldogs that year, walked away with the title of Player of the Year. There's also been other finalists: Alec Davidson, Reed Martin, and now Chase Ricke is the fourth player to be a finalist for Player of the Year in OKPreps history. And now this is the sixth year that we've been doing this now. So we've handed out this will be our sixth award. So there's only been 6 years worth of finalists, and Lincoln Christian now has a state leading 4 finalists with Chase Ricke. And he helped lead Lincoln Christian to something that Micah Wilson was unable to do. They walked away with a silver ball back in 2015. Ricke and the Bulldogs walked away with a gold ball this year, as it was a complete team performance. But Ricke, again, an outstanding leader on the field, off the field, and obviously being the son of head coach Jerry Ricke, he's just an extension of that coaching staff on the field, as he became a field general this season, and so precision-like with his ability to throw the football all over the field, finishing with over 50 touchdowns through the air. And we mentioned his dad and head coach Jerry Ricke. Here's Coach Ricke on why Chase should be this year's Player of the Year.
You know, Chase has done a great job leading our football team this year. He started as a sophomore. We went 5-7, got beat in the second round. You know, we made it to the semifinals the next year, going 11-2, and then he's brought us to the championship, got us a gold ball, was a big integral part in that. He's thrown for a ton of yards. He had 110 touchdowns in his career, and the overall thing that makes Chase stand out is just his leadership and the way he cares about his teammates. He'd be the first to give his offensive line, his running backs, and honestly his defense the credit, because he knows that football is the ultimate team sport, and he couldn't do it without those guys. So he just really had a good year this year, leading our team to the state championship, and we're really proud of him.
A perfect 14-0 season. Heritage Hall fell short to Lincoln Christian in the semifinals, as Lincoln was able to get a little bit of revenge after losing to Heritage Hall last year. Lincoln knocked off Heritage Hall in the semifinals this season, and Chase Ricke had a great performance in that game, helping lead the Bulldogs jump out to a 20-0 lead at the end of the first quarter, and they would roll on to a victory in that and put Lincoln Christian in the state championship game against Plainview, where they would walk away with the gold ball after knocking off Plainview 42-21. Chase Ricke, the latest finalist for Player of the Year.
Cole Duggar, senior quarterback, Owasso.
Talk about making an instant impact, as Cole Duggar came into Owasso as a first-year starter at QB, but not a stranger to the position. He helped lead Collinsville to the Class 5A semifinals last year before moving down to Owasso, moving south, I should say, to Owasso from Collinsville, and immediately took some leadership roles with Owasso in the offseason, and it showed, as he would win the starting role at QB, and he would never look back, as he helped lead Owasso to a perfect season. We mentioned Bixby earlier doing something that they've never done before, going 13-0, undefeated season. Owasso having a perfect undefeated season as well for the first time in school history. They would win their second state championship in the last 3 years, helping in large part due to senior quarterback Cole Duggar. He finished with 3,350 yards passing, completing 63% of his passes. He had 42 touchdowns and only 2 interceptions. He also had an impact in the running game, as he finished with 267 yards on 57 carries and 2 touchdowns as well. We mentioned Duggar helping lead Owasso to a state championship, and he had to do so in large part without arguably Owasso's most talented player on the offensive side of the ball, as running back Isaiah Jacobs hurt his leg late in September, the first game of district play against Union, and they would not get Jacobs back for the rest of the season. Owasso and Duggar and this offense did not miss a beat, as he helped lead them to a perfect regular season and then they would knock off 3 straight teams, Norman, Broken Arrow, and then the Jinx Trojans, to raise the gold ball. And Duggar was nearly flawless in his approach throughout the season, and he made an impact early on as well. Head coach Bill Blankenship on why Duggar should be this year's Player of the Year.
I'm telling you, Cole can do it all. Having spent a year with him now, to watch him win 13 games, to perform at the very highest level in the most gut-wrenching opportunities. Dude can run it, he can throw it, he takes care of the ball. To have 42 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, I mean, this guy is the ultimate quarterback as far as I'm concerned.
It should be mentioned that Duggar, I said he had an impact early on in the season. Even with Jacobs in the backfield with him, he grabbed headlines in the very first game of the 2019 season when Owasso went on the road to take on Bentonville West. They were trailing 34-20 in the third quarter, and Duggar helped lead a comeback. I believe he finished with 3 touchdowns passing, another touchdown on the ground, as he helped Owasso in that come-from-behind victory over Bentonville West. And that, of course, would be the start of a perfect 13-0 season for the Owasso Rams.
Elijah Wright, senior athlete, Vian.
We mentioned Vian's Elijah Wright as an athlete and not a specific position because I don't know what position to write down. He played just about every position skill-wise that you can on the offensive side of the ball. He lined up as a receiver. He lined up as a tight end, as a fullback, as a running back, as a wildcat quarterback. On the defensive side of the ball, he's lined up on the line of scrimmage. He's lined up as a linebacker. He's even helped out in special teams as well. So he's played just about double digits as far as positions on the football field goes. So we just simply call him an athlete, and he is just that. We mentioned all those positions that he played on offense, defense, and in special teams. He had an impact in all 3 phases of the game, helping lead Vian to a 13-2 season. They would finish as the runner-up in Class 2A, losing a heartbreaker to Metro Christian in Asher Link, fellow Player of the Year finalist in the state championship game. Wright would have an impact on offense, carrying the ball 64 times this year for 728 yards. He would finish with 10 touchdowns on the ground. He also caught the ball 18 times for 336 yards and 4 touchdowns receiving. On the defensive side of the ball, he was an absolute menace. Him and younger brother Solomon Wright, a defensive tackle for Vian, made up one of the nastiest 1-2 punches in Class 2A and really in Oklahoma defensively this year. Elijah would finish with 136 tackles. 37 of those would be for tackles for loss, and he also finished with 16 sacks on the season. He would force 3 fumbles, and he returned 1 of those for a touchdown. And I mentioned special teams as well, as he took not 1 but 2 kickoffs back for TDs. As Elijah Wright did just about everything for Vian, they would ultimately fall short to Metro Christian, but that doesn't knock Elijah. I mean, he's one of the best players in the state, one of the most complete players in the state, and it showed as the Wolverines would line Elijah up at a variety of positions. They would ask him to do a lot. He even threw a touchdown pass in their championship game against Metro Christian. Elijah Wright, without a doubt, one of the best players in Class 2A and one of the best players in the state of Oklahoma this year. Here's his head coach, Gary Willis, on why Elijah should be this year's Player of the Year.
Elijah's not only his athletic ability, but his leadership. He was a huge part of our offense and defense. Ton of stats on defense. We spread the ball out a lot on offense. Could have very easily been 1,000, 1,500-yard rusher, but with the plan of keeping guys healthy to make a playoff run or a state championship run, we spread the ball around a lot. Had a huge game in a state championship game. Unbelievable. Elijah's a better person than he is a player, and he's a great player, but just great leadership and, special kid.
It should also be mentioned that Elijah and Vian, they would finish 13-2. Those 2 losses came to state champions, of course losing to Metro Christian in the state championship game in Class 2A, but back in non-district play, they would lose a very close road game to Lincoln Christian, who would go on to win the Class 3A state championship. In fact, the 25 points that Lincoln scored on Vian, that was their season low. Vian held them to just 25 points. That was a team that averaged nearly 50 points per game, and Vian would hold them to just about half of their season average throughout the season. So only 2 losses on the year, both of them coming to teams that would be raising gold balls this year.
Gunnar Gundy, senior quarterback, Stillwater.
We mentioned that this is the 6th year that we've been around here at OKPreps.com, and so this is the 6th time that we've had our Player of the Year finalists, and this is only the 2nd occurrence where we've had a set of teammates be announced as Player of the Year finalists, and the first is Gunnar Gundy, the senior QB for the Stillwater Pioneers. He was absolutely flawless this season as the senior QB of the Stillwater attack. He's now a 3-year starter at quarterback for the Pioneers. Also saw plenty of time his freshman season. He would complete 74% of his passes for 3,481 yards. He would finish the year with 47 touchdowns and just 3 interceptions. He also ran the ball just a little bit, but enough to get 5 touchdowns on the ground on 17 carries for 49 yards. He helped lead Stillwater to one of their best seasons in school history. They would finish the year 12-1, and they would unfortunately lose to Bixby in a very highly anticipated 1-2 matchup in the 6A2 state championship game. Gundy, I mentioned playing flawlessly this year as a senior. He would have not 1 but 2 different games this season when he had only 1 incompletion on the night. This was a kid that was insanely accurate with the football, and that's a big reason why he's a finalist for this year's award, one of the best in the state when it comes to completion percentage. That touchdown to interception ratio is insane. He just simply did not make mistakes, and we were in awe of what Stillwater would do offensively throughout the season. They would be putting up 60 points like it was nothing. And you take a look at all these stats, and we have another finalist for Stillwater that we're going to get to in just a minute. But when you look at Gundy's stats and when you look at the stats of the other finalists for Stillwater, also keep this in mind. They didn't play in the second half of a lot of these ball games that they won this season. So if they would have played all 4 quarters, they would have absolutely shattered every record book when it comes to throwing the football. Here's his head coach, Tucker Barnard, on why Gunnar should be this year's Player of the Year.
Man, I think he's got a special work ethic, almost competitiveness, and just a drive to be really, really good. He's got great accuracy throwing the football, and makes great decisions.
Gundy and the Pioneers unfortunately would fall short again to Bixby in the state championship game for the 2nd consecutive season, but he had an outstanding season without a doubt as a senior, and we mentioned the step that he took from his junior to senior season, becoming one of the best players and one of the best quarterbacks in the state of Oklahoma. That's a big reason why he's a finalist for this year's Player of the Year award.
Phillip Smitherman, senior wide receiver and defensive back, Heritage Hall.
Heritage Hall senior Phillip Smitherman is like some of the other finalists for this year's award, as he did a little bit of everything for the Chargers this season, as Heritage Hall would go 11-1 but fall short in the semifinals to eventual state champion Lincoln Christian. Smitherman had his biggest impact in the passing game as a wide receiver for the Chargers, as he would finish with 71 catches for 1,396 yards. He also finished with 14 touchdown receptions. He also carried the ball plenty of times as well, 24 carries for 205 yards and 4 touchdowns. It shouldn't be overlooked that he also had an impact on the defensive side of the ball with just over 100 tackles at 105 to be exact. He had 5 interceptions as well, one of which he took back for a touchdown. We'll mention more on that pick 6 in just a moment. I said that Heritage Hall would fall short of the championship game for the first time in a while, as they would go 11-1 on the season. But Phillip Smitherman was one of the biggest impact players for Heritage Hall this year. He is currently committed to Harvard. He's one of the smartest and most intelligent players, without a doubt, in the state of Oklahoma, getting an opportunity to play college ball at Harvard. And he's one of the more impactful players as Heritage Hall, week after week. This wasn't this wasn't as dominant of a Heritage Hall team as we've seen in the last few years. Last year they rolled to a state championship. Connor Carey was a finalist for Player of the Year. They had an identity on that team. This Heritage Hall team was different, though, in 2019, as they struggled at times throughout the season to find that consistency on offense. The one consistent theme, though, was the play of Phillip Smitherman on offense and defense. He's without a doubt their best player, and he's just jumped up the rankings when it comes to recruiting circles, as he's being widely considered as one of the top playmakers in Oklahoma. Here's his head coach, Brett Bogert, on why Phillip should be this year's Player of the Year.
He's a great kid, obviously an outstanding football player, outstanding academics, going to Harvard. There's not many kids that get the opportunity to do that. And he's one of them. He's a guy that I was fortunate enough to coach for 6 years, from 7th grade all the way through. And he just got better and better and smarter and smarter. And several times this year, we'd watch him, get an interception on defense, score the touchdown on offense, and then run down and make the tackle on the kickoff team. And he truly was the type of kid that didn't come off the field unless the game got out of hand. So we're certainly going to miss him. He's one of a kind. There's no doubt about it.
We mentioned that he had one of those interceptions, he had 5 interceptions on the year, but one of them was a pick 6. That came in the district game against Perkins Tryon, and if you remember, Perkins Tryon had one of the better seasons in recent memory. They were upsetting teams, and they were just about a minute away from potentially upsetting Heritage Hall in October, until Phillip Smitherman intercepted a pass and took it back for a touchdown with just under a minute to go to give Heritage Hall the ultimate victory and avoid a crazy upset on the road against Perkins Tryon. We mentioned him as a complete player, offense, defense. He did it all for the Chargers, and that's a big reason why he's a Player of the Year finalist.
Quantrell Walker, junior running back, Stillwater.
We mentioned that there were 2 teammates from Stillwater that were finalists for the award. The other is the junior running back from Stillwater, Quantrell Walker. He's the only junior to be a finalist for the award this year. We had 3 juniors as finalists in 2018. Only one made the cut in 2019, and that's Quantrell Walker. And he could not be denied after running for over 2,000 yards on the season and only 212 carries. That's what's so impressive. He had a big workload this season, running for over 2,000 yards, 32 touchdowns. He only carried the ball 212 times to get to that 2,000-yard mark. He also caught 9 passes for 115 yards and 1 touchdown. Ultimately, Stillwater, as mentioned earlier with Gunnar Gundy, Stillwater would make it all the way to the state championship game behind a dominant offense and a stingy defense. They would go 12-0 all the way to the title game before losing to Bixby in the state championship for the 2nd consecutive year. However, Quantrell Walker had one of the best moments in that championship game, and one of the best moments in 2019, if we're being honest, as he had the best run that I've seen all season, as he broke at least 6 tackles. He made so many Bixby defenders miss, and he gave Stillwater the go-ahead touchdown with a little over 3 minutes to go. And, of course, we know how that story ended. Bixby would drive down. They would score a touchdown with just over a minute left on a Braylon Presley TD reception, and it would kind of overshadow that magical run by Quantrell Walker. But if you're looking, a Heisman moment, so to speak, as a moment, a performance that's indicative of why this player is a finalist for this year's award, without a doubt, it was that touchdown run against Bixby. It was one of the best that we've seen in person all year. It was one of the best touchdown runs, period, in Oklahoma this season. Here's his head coach, Tucker Barnard, on why Q should be this year's Player of the Year.
I think just balance, vision, desire. I think his last touchdown run in the championship game against Bixby kind of was the picture of his desire to win. he and Gunnar, they were a great compliment to each other. They probably hurt each other's stats a little bit, but worked really well together for us.
Quantrell Walker has been an impact player for the Pioneers since his freshman year. He saw plenty of time as a freshman, and then he became, without a doubt, their go-to running back as a sophomore and into his junior seasons. It's going to be interesting to see what he does next year. With Gundy graduating in May, it'll be Walker's team and Walker's backfield in 2020. I can't wait to see what Q does for an encore.
Savion Morrison, senior running back, Edison.
He's the last finalist for Player of the Year, but he's potentially the biggest name. Edison's Savion Morrison, a Nebraska commit and last year's winner of the OKPreps Player of the Year award, so obviously it goes without saying he's now a two-time finalist for the award. He had an outstanding senior season when all eyes were on him and the Edison Eagles. In 2019, he carried the ball 183 times for 1,798 yards and 26 touchdowns. And it should be noted that obviously those stats are not near as good as the stats that he put up last year as a junior. And that's in large part due to two things. One, he didn't play as much as he did as a junior. He didn't have as heavy of a workload because the team at Edison was better. He helped lead the Eagles to an 11-1 record and a spot in the 5A quarterfinals, a district championship to go along with it. They would lose their first game in the regular season, and then they wouldn't lose again until the 5A quarterfinals. Savion Morrison obviously had that big run to end the 2018 season during the regular season, but he was just out of gas in the playoffs, and so Edison didn't want that to happen again. So late in the regular season, Savion Morrison would get a little more extra rest. He would start games, he would play a series here, a series there, but then he would rest up for the playoffs. And so Edison definitely didn't want a repeat of 2018 with another early exit in the postseason. They would make it to the 5A quarterfinals. They would lose a heartbreaker to Bishop McGuinness, and more on that in just a little bit. But here's head coach Tony Daniels on why Savion should be the first ever two-time winner of Player of the Year.
I think it's his personality. I think that you mix in football, and of course that's what everyone thinks of, but he's a genuinely fantastic human being. He just, the things obviously on the football field that he can do, the vision, the speed, the power, everything that he possesses out there on the football field, he does, and he does it just so fluidly. But also at the same time, he's just a great young man, and I think that that's what's going to help him be so successful at Nebraska. I think that you add in the characteristics of what he can do on the football field, but then you also go ahead and add in the kind of person that he is, that he has grown up to be, being able to be successful in and out of the classroom. He's really taken it personal these last couple of years of grades and turning things around for him, but also just the family style atmosphere that he's going to be surrounded himself by there in Nebraska. I just think that he's just a overall great young man.
We mentioned that Edison would lose to Bishop McGuinness in the 5A quarterfinals, and it should be noted, and you probably were hiding under a rock if you don't already know this, but Morrison would leave the game with a leg injury in that highly anticipated game between Edison and McGuinness. Savion Morrison and Dominic Richardson, two of the best running backs in Oklahoma over the last couple of years. And unfortunately, Morrison would suffer a leg injury in the first half, and that would sideline him for the rest of the quarterfinals. And obviously, it's easy to kind of think, what would have happened had he been healthy? Could Edison have made it all the way to the title game? We'll never know. But nevertheless, without a doubt, Morrison, again, a Player of the Year finalist. All right, those are the 10 finalists for this year's Player of the Year award. We appreciate you tuning in. Whether you're watching us, whether you're listening to us, we appreciate that. We want to remind you once again to subscribe, whether it's on youtube.com/OKPreps or our podcast network. Just search OK Preps on iTunes or Apple Podcasts. Wherever you get your podcasts, just search OK Preps and listen to us there. We appreciate you tuning in. Be sure to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and as always, you can visit OKPreps.com for all the latest in high school sports. We got plenty of postseason content coming up over the next couple of weeks. The poll is now open to vote for your choice, the fans' choice, for the 2019 OK Preps Player of the Year. We'll announce the winner in exactly 2 weeks on Monday, December 30th. The poll will close at noon, so vote now, vote often, vote every day for your pick for this year's Fans' Choice winner. We'll announce the winner on December 30th. The Player of the Year, the sixth ever Player of the Year, will be announced on December 31st, right back here in our OK Prep studios with a special trophy presentation to the winner of this year's Player of the Year for 2019. As always, we want to remind you to subscribe, to visit us on OKPreps.com. We have plenty of postseason content. As I mentioned, our season in review series will start later on this week, so be sure to check that out. Another reason to subscribe to our YouTube channel is all the basketball highlights that we're about to have. The Tournament of Champions is coming up next week on December 26th. It tips off at the Mabee Center. We're going to have plenty of video content coming from that, so be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Again, congratulations to all 10 finalists for this year's Player of the Year award. It's been an outstanding 2019 football season, and all 10 of these finalists have earned their spot at the table here as a finalist for this year's 2019 OK Preps Player of the Year. One final time, I'm Michael Knight, the director of OKPreps.com, and you've been watching or listening to this OK Preps special.